Hi, everyone, and welcome to the How to Love Your Partner interview series, where we're talking about how to master the messiness of couplehood together. I'm your host, Robin D'Angelo, and throughout the series, I am interviewing relationship and love experts from all over to give you tips, tools, strategies, and the support you need to navigate couplehood and love your partner a little bit more. And today's guest is Annabelle Bugatti. She is a couples counselor, therapist, and relationship expert in Las Vegas, Nevada, my hometown. So yay! Today, Annabelle is going to be talking to us about how to love your partner who just won't change. So I'm assuming this is going to be one of our most popular topics. And Annabelle, why don't you just share with everyone just a little bit about you and how you came to support couples in creating phenomenal relationships?
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Annabelle Bugatti, and I really have a passion for couples, and that came to be when I went through my own divorce in my early 20s. And, I thought I was the poster child for healthy marriage, grew up in a good Christian home, and we didn't believe in divorce. And I believed in all these romantic ideas about eternal love and all you need is love and all these ideas. And then, in practical application, it looked a lot different. And then I married somebody that was very mismatched for me, and we had a lot of problems. And we went through counseling, and I learned so much about myself. And unfortunately, it requires two people to make a marriage last and change. So while it did not save our marriage, it radically changed my life. And I learned so much about me and about what it takes to really make a marriage work. And even though getting a divorce was the right decision for us, it was still one of the most difficult decisions I had to make in my adult life. And it was extremely painful. And again, because there was the huge value conflict with my personal beliefs, I really felt a calling. I've always been interested in psychology and being a psychotherapist, but it was my experience with really wanting to help couples get on the right path, if they can save it, to sort of help them. From my experience, hindsight is always 20/20. So, that's where my passion for helping couples came from. And I work with a model of therapy called emotionally focused therapy, where it's a very non-blaming kind of therapy, whereas, a lot of models would like to point out who's at fault and what you could do. The idea is that we both contribute to our marriage, to both making it work and to making it disconnect, whether that's intentional or unintentional. So we really work together to find couples' patterns of how they interact and disconnect, and try to create safety and break through barriers and help each other be more vulnerable and find a place of connection once again. So
Wow, thank you. And I just have to say, from one couples therapist to another, thank you for what you do, and thank you for what you bring into the lives of people that need it. I just appreciate you being you and doing what you do. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for you too.
all this gratitude. I love it. So let's dive in. Let's talk about this partner who just won't change. Annabelle, what is the deal? Are they just stubborn? Help us understand the person who won't change.
Well, oftentimes I get couples who come into my office and their complaint is, well, if my partner would just change, if they would just do this differently or do that differently, then things could be fine.
Yep.
And, the problem is that you're wasting a lot of effort trying to force them to change something that they're never going to change. And it's nothing personal. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions that couples have about a partner who is stubborn or rigid in their ways. And we're not talking about people who are, violent or, emotionally abusive or verbally abusive. We're not talking about, really dysfunctional relationships. We're talking about people who, maybe your spouse or your mate doesn't handle stress very well, or, like they leave the toilet seat up all the time, or your wife has a bad habit of leaving her shoes all over the house. Whatever the habit is, we keep getting angrier and angrier that despite us saying, hey, this bothers me, can you please change it? They won't change it. And then we start internalizing it and taking it personally as, we're constructing meaning around something that's otherwise neutral. They've been doing this forever. And, if your spouse hasn't been dealing with stress very well since you married them, chances are it's not going to change, no matter how much better your way or how effective your method of dealing with stress is. Your role and your job in the marriage is not to get them to change. And that creates a very unhealthy dynamic, because one person may come off as a parent or a nag or a complainer, and the other spouse automatically takes the opposite. They feel like, I need to defend what I do, and now you're caught in this parent-child dynamic. And nothing kills intimacy faster than feeling like you're in a relationship with your parent or your child.
Yeah, for sure. And would you say, in your experience, the person who doesn't change, I mean, is it typically a man, a woman? Is there a difference?
Well, okay. So the thing is that both men and women equally have habits that they want to be accepted by their spouse or their mate that are less than ideal. However, I do find that women tend to be more of they tend to vocalize their complaints more than men. I feel that men are a little more accepting, or they just sort of deal with it. Maybe that gift of the laser beam focus, they realize there's other things to focus on. But, the point is still the same, is that, we all have habits, we all have beliefs, we all have interests that we came into a relationship with, and we want to be loved and accepted just as we are, and we want people to honor those. So why then do we expect our mate or our spouse to sacrifice their habits or their interests or their beliefs for us?
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you highlighting the fact that, although in your practice, it may be women that you're seeing that are more vocal about it, I love that you highlight the fact that men have the same needs and same wants. They just don't express it in the same way, right? I mean, we hear the traditional, she's an ag, and, he just doesn't listen, right? And so I appreciate this, because I want our audience to hear that just because you don't hear your partner saying, this is an issue for me and I need something else from you, they still have needs. So thank you for highlighting that.
Yeah. And oftentimes what happens is that we think we know what's best for others. And if we're really honest with ourselves, it could be that that we settled for something that, and so we figure that by settling, we can just, change the other person so that we don't feel as badly about our choice. And if you're entering into a relationship hoping that the other person will change, you're entering it for the wrong reasons, or you're staying in it for the wrong reasons. Because if you can't accept your mate or your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your spouse, your partner, whoever, if you can't accept them just as they are, bad habits and annoying things and all, then you're really creating a recipe for hardship and disaster later on down the line.
For sure. And I want the audience to hear that there's a difference between accepting it and celebrating it and loving it, because we don't love the things that bother us, but we can start accepting. And something that I love to talk about is granting grace, right? Mental granting grace of just
yeah,
and not letting that anger kind of overtake. So for the person who is, maybe for the person who's listening, who is the one that is I'm not going to change. This is who I am. And, what do they want their partners to really, truly just understand about them?
I think what they really want their partners to know is that they're not doing it as a slight against their partner. Their behavior is not intentional to hurt their partner. It's just how they're wired. Again, if they came into the relationship with this habit, whether you guys got together when you were 18 or 35, so they've had 18 or 35 years of doing something a certain way. And it wasn't personal when they did it before you got together, and it's certainly not personal after you got together. It's just their way of doing it. And most of the time I find they just desperately want their spouse or their mate to accept them and sort of stop harping on them or nagging them, because they really feel like they're less than when they're constantly being picked on, or they feel picked on when their spouse is always saying, why can't you do this better? Why can't you change that? You never get it right. You know, that really begins a vicious cycle of resentment, both on the side of the person wishing the other person would change and on the side of the person who's being told they need to change.
Yes.
And it really is hurtful for them. And again, there's no malintent. It's just the way that they are. And they're really just looking for acceptance, genuine acceptance. This is who I am. And I love you, even though you have annoying habits that bother me. And even though I think I know best, I still love you.
And that is the message that I hope our audience hears, is that you can still love your partner and find their annoying habits incredibly annoying, but not let that,
Yes.
You love them any less.
Yes. And to do that, it really requires a mindset. Again, the biggest problem is that we're the ones who think they need to change. So we really need to do a mindset, change our mindset, not our spouse. And, when you really get out of the way of your own needs, a lot of times people, you ask them, well, is what your spouse doing hurtful? And they're like, well, yeah, it is hurting me. Well, it's not, if they're not psychologically or emotionally abusing you, if it's just the fact that they can't, they're very absent-minded, they can't remember to put the cap on the toothpaste, they always leave the garage door open, even though you tell them 7 days a week, whatever it is, we need to sort of let go of the idea that this is personal, that they're doing this against us, and accept it in a way where we recognize this is just how they are. Yeah. This is not against me. And, just change your mindset, because the biggest problem we get sucked into is the meaning that we're making out of their habits, which is that this is a personal thing against me. If they only loved me, why wouldn't they do things that make me better? And so we're saying it's hurtful because we are the ones choosing to get hurt over it. And it is a choice. If you know that your spouse is that way and you're not accepting it, in a way, you're sort of choosing to get hurt over it. And it doesn't have to be that way. Now, we're not saying that you should be a doormat to your spouse or get walked on. We're not talking about those kinds of things. We're just talking about pure acceptance. And when you're able to let go of your idea of what's best and allow your spouse or your mate to be truly who they are, and accept that, you feel liberated because you're no longer getting angry and resentful towards them. And they actually feel liberated because they feel like, wow, they actually do love me, and
all of me, right?
Yes. And acceptance is a phenomenal tool just for both you and for your mate. Really just to learn to be okay with your mate being them.
Yeah. And Annabelle, you talk about, shifting of the mindset and acceptance. And so for those that may be partnered with someone who's not willing to change, or is saying, no, I'm not going to change, but how do they start to make those shifts? Because it sounds so simple the way you said it. You just change your mind and you choose. So for those watching going, how in the world would I even start this process? What tips do you have for them?
Well, one of the first things you can do is really ask yourself, why does this really bother me? Sometimes those habits bug us because of, again, what we think they really mean. Does my spouse or mate interrupt me all the time because they think that what I'm saying is not important? Do they keep hounding me about, tasks I need to do because they don't trust me? And sometimes you wonder if your spouse is just doing it to get under your skin. So instead of wondering why your spouse does those things, it may just be better to ask them, for example, hey, do you realize that, when I'm talking, you tend to interrupt me a lot? And I interpret that as kind of hurtful, like maybe what I have to say isn't important. Do I have that right? Or is there another reason? They may not even be aware of what they're doing. Sometimes you may point it out, but sometimes we have automatic habits that just, are just deeply encoded in our brains, and it's second nature. We don't even realize when we do it.
Right.
But, and again, the other reason why habits tend to frustrate us is because we think we have a better way or a certain way of doing things and have a low tolerance for a spouse who thinks or does things very differently. So, yes, could it be really annoying that they always leave, the bathroom door open when they're using it, or leaving their stuff around the house? You can notice it, but again, ask, why does this really bother me? Is there some, older wound that gets triggered every time this habit comes up that needs to be addressed? Because no one responds well to criticism. And a lot of time, the inability to accept our partner, again, comes from that meaning, which we often assign to their behavior that's incorrect. And figuring out what the meaning is that we give to their behavior and why it's such a big deal is so awesome. When you can tune into this, it's easier to address what your need is rather than their behavior, because their behavior oftentimes is just a trigger. So we need to figure out what our underlying need is and talk to our partner about this need. And to be honest, when it comes down to it, it's so unnecessary to be right and argue silly points or position yourself as an authority on anything, much less how your spouse or partner should be. My pastor always used to say, you can be happy or you can be right, but you can't be both. But, really allowing your mate to have their own opinions and preferences, and accepting that in most cases, there's really no need to be right or wrong, can really take away a lot of stress and fights with your partner.
Absolutely. What about, though, for the people that might be listening going, there's certain things that if they were to change, they would help, say, our finances, or they would help the way we spend time with our kids, or when they, in their minds, it feels like it would actually enhance the relationship. What do you say to that? What are your suggestions?
Well, again, you both have to be on the same page. And if you're, it would totally be ideal if our spouse or mate were on the same page with us about every single thing.
Right.
It would just be amazing. And again, if we keep trying to have discussions about, how if we could get on the same page about our spending or our, our financial goals, this would really, make the relationship much more deeply connected. You have to ask yourself if that's not changing, and all you're doing is, coming up against a wall and you're constantly butting your head against that wall, it's not enhancing your relationship. In fact, it's actually taking away from it. So you'll just have to find other ways to connect. If you're the person who's better organized, or maybe has higher standards of cleanliness, or is good at saving, then utilize your talents in the relationship and do it because that's just your habit. If you were living alone, you would be doing these things anyway. So even though you're sharing the responsibility with the spouse, you don't have to stop doing things your way. It's the problem comes when you start expecting your spouse or your mate to do things to that same standard.
Yes, I love that example, Annabelle, is if you were living by yourself, you would be doing these things anyway. I love that because I think it takes some of the pressure off you expecting someone else. And I don't know about you, but it just reminded me of kind of this really toxic mindset that a lot of couples have, which is why should I have to? Or why do I need to be the one who? Why do I always? And your comment of, if you were alone, is it something you would be doing anyway? I love that because it just obliterates that whole sense of, why do I have to be the one? Well, if that's your thing, that's your thing.
Yeah. And it's okay that you are differently matched. Again, I have couples, the cleanliness thing tends to come up a lot. Yeah. You have one spouse who is really anally clean, and you have a spouse who is not so much. And the person who's anally clean just keeps getting really upset, despite they keep telling their spouse, hey, you know, can you just keep it clean? Stop leaving your dirty dishes in the sink. Stop doing this. And, you know, they might be absent-minded. They might be in a big hurry. Who really knows what's going on? But if you've been telling them for 10 years, please don't do this, and their cleanliness habit has not changed, again, the person who's having the problem and the resentment and the anger is you. Yeah. So accept that your partner has lower standards than you, and that doesn't mean anything bad. Again, it's the meaning that you're making of it. You may have a talent for being super clean. Mm-hmm. And so part of you may have to, again, raise your own tolerance for a partner that is different. And I mean, it's not going to hurt you psychologically if your house is not as clean. Sure, would it bother you? Would things perhaps be more efficient or feel better and more relaxed? Sure, I could get that. Mm-hmm. Again, you're sharing your space with somebody else. So there has to be, again, that level of compromise. Right. You know, I can be as clean as I want to be, and I can ask my spouse to be as clean as they can be. And if they can't meet my standards, somewhere I'm going to have to give up the fight and recognize this is just how they are and learn to be okay with this. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, and do you have any helpful tools for those that might be listening and they're going, okay, I hear you. Rationally, this makes sense, but I'm not quite sure how to build my tolerance or how to really step in to start accepting that. Because I mean, that's big, especially when you're talking about couples that have been together for 10, 20 years and they're going, oh my gosh, I mean, I just have to get to that point where my tolerance is higher. So how do they start to do that, Annabelle?
Well, there's a few things that you can do. One of the first things is practicing patience. And believe me, for someone like me, patience is not always a virtue, but it's something, you know, again, recognizing where can I improve myself? Because again, we tend to look all at the other person, mm-hmm. and that's where we're getting really choked up and having a hard time. But if we start looking at ourselves, what is it that I can change? Because the only person you can change is yourself. So you really got to look inside, what qualities could I improve that might make this situation more tolerable for me, help me not have so much anxiety or stress or frustration around it. So practicing patience. Mm-hmm. And again, you know, in addition to asking yourself, why does this really bother me? Practicing acceptance. And you can practice that again by shifting your belief from, this is a problem, they're doing this against me, to it's okay for them to be this way. This is their way, and stop personalizing their behavior as something hurtful towards you, and let them learn to just live as they are. But in addition, you can also emphasize the positives. Again, when you first fell in love with this person, you probably knew that they had these habits, but again, because you were in love, love gives you what we like to call in psychology the halo effect. So you tend to just gloss over the negative things and only see the positives. And then after the nice, you know, because your brain bathes itself in all these nice hormones and chemicals when you're first in love. And when that luster starts to wear off, you start to see things in a different light. Mm-hmm. But something that you could do that will really help is, instead of focusing on the negative, emphasize the positive. Each day, you know, or maybe a couple days a week or once a week, write down 3 things that you love about your partner, or something you admire about them, or why you fell in love. Putting back on those rose-colored glasses will help you feel better about your partner and make those annoying habits seem far less intolerable.
Yes, and I am such a proponent for that exercise, and I do this, you know, every day, and I encourage my clients to do this, and it really does. It really shifts the way that you just perceive your partner. I mean, you can come off of a fight, and when you sit down to write those 3 or 5 or 10, whatever things that you just appreciate about them, right? It can start small. It doesn't have to be, we're so in love, but it's like, I can just appreciate that they got up and went to work today. Sometimes you just
focusing on, you know, like the small things. You know, the Dalai Lama in his book The Art of Happiness talks about being thankful for what you have and as you are. So if you translate that into your relationship and be thankful for the positive qualities that your spouse has, your whole mindset starts focusing on the wonderful, amazing things that they do and not on the negative things that they do. Because no matter who you're with, they're always going to have some negative thing that probably gets on your nerves, just as you have some negative things that probably gets on your mate's nerves. And again, you want them to accept you, so you've got to practice the same thing that you're asking for them to give you. And a lot of times, again, we're really afraid to let go of the negatives because we're afraid, again, that it means something against us. And if we give it up, we're just going to be a doormat. And no, we're not asking you to be a doormat. We're just talking about shifting your mindset, again, because we're trying to accept the other person. And when you change and start focusing on the good things that your spouse has, you start seeing them in a whole new light, and your emotions change, your thoughts change, and you can actually re-fall in love with the person that you're with. It's such a positive factor.
Oh my gosh. And me being the love geek that I am, just loved what you said, falling in love with your partner all over again. I love it. And it's possible. And it's not just in the romantic comedies. Like, it's all in how you choose, right?
Yes.
Every single day, how to show up. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited about this.
And I can tell you something funny. So, it really pays to keep things in perspective. Some of the younger generations may not know who this person is, but commentator Andy Rooney once said that he's learned certain things about life, and that being kind is more important than being right, especially in a relationship. And he also said that when you harbor bitterness, happiness will dock elsewhere, which is also very important. And he said he also learned that one should keep words soft and tender because tomorrow you may have to eat them. And we can't choose how we feel, but we can choose what we do. Again, our spouse may get on our nerves, but we can't help that we get angry, but we can choose what we do with those angry feelings. We could count to 10, we could shoot off a prayer, we could laugh it off, give them a hug, whatever it is we need to do. Again, we can't control what we do with it.
Annabelle, this has been so insightful and just so incredibly hopeful, especially for those who may be really frustrated because their partners aren't changing. So thank you so much for just being here and imparting your wisdom on all of us.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that you have this program available for couples. It's amazing. So make sure you all tune in.
Yay! Yes, we have lots of great interviews, but I know you had a little something you wanted to share with everyone just for being here. Why don't you tell them about that?
Yeah, so I put together a little freebie. If you click on the link, there's a little freebie that comes up that just sort of highlights some of the things that we talked about in this interview about how to accept your partner and practicing acceptance and patience and talking about shifting your mindset. So if that's something that you struggle with, you might find this very helpful and just sort of to help you reinforce the message.
Wonderful. And I know it is nice to have something tangible to walk away with. So thank you. And for those who are listening who want to reach out and connect and maybe work with you, where can they find out more information about you?
Absolutely. So I actually have two websites. The first one is LasVegasMarriageCounseling.com. Again, I have a private practice where I see both couples and individuals for a variety of issues, but my passion is in helping people with their relationship issues and finding hope and harmony. But I also see professional athletes and corporate professionals and help them with success coaching and wellness coaching. A lot of them are generally more well-rounded and well-balanced than most others, but they tend to have mental blocks that keep them from really pushing against those barriers. They have some mental blocks that keep them from reaching that next level of success. So we work together to remove the mental blocks. And that website is lvsportstherapy.com. So you can also reach out to me on that site either way.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you again for just making all this information available to such, a large community of people. I know this has been really helpful for so many people. Thank you, Annabelle.
You're welcome. And thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. And it's a wonderful thing that you're doing, and keep it up.
Totally, totally will. And thank you everyone for joining us today, and just really soak in the wisdom and the support from Annabelle today on how to love your partner who just won't change. And be sure to keep an eye on your inbox because you'll be receiving another interview tomorrow. And again, I'm Robin D'Angelo, your host, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.